Thank you so much for tuning in to She's All Over the Place with Katie. That's me. Welcome back to She's All Over the Place. I am so excited to have you here once again. We have an impactful episode for you today. First and foremost, I would like to say thank you so much. We are now in the top 1.5% out of all podcasts. Out of over almost 3 million podcasts, we're now in the 1.5%, and it's because of you tuning in. Thank you so much. Make sure you're subscribing. Make sure to share this episode. It's really impactful, an important topic, and we're just going to dive right in. Today, I have India Thusi. And guess what? She is a law professor. This is my very first time having a law professor on the episode of She's All Over the Place podcast. And we're going to chat about feminism, law, human rights, sex work. We haven't really talked about some of these things on the podcast before, and that's what the Women Empowerment Podcast is all about. Exploring divine femininity in all genders and talking about things that maybe aren't talked about on certain platforms. And so I'm here to shed light, hold space, and give the mic to India. Thank you so much for joining me, India.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited about our conversation today.
Me too. Okay, so nuts and bolts, roots. Where are you from?
I'm actually from New York. So I grew up in Yonkers, New York. Well, I was born in Nigeria, immigrated here when I was a few weeks old, spent most of my life, or at least my young childhood, in New York, in Yonkers. Lived in the Bronx a little bit and in Harlem, but that uptown kind of New York City area is where I'm from.
Dope. Love New York. Cool. I think you're the first person who was birthed in Nigeria on the podcast as well. So this is going to be a first of many on this special episode. Tell us about your education and what inspired you to go into law.
Yeah, I wanted to be a lawyer since I was very young. I don't know why. I'm pretty sure I didn't know what a lawyer did or was. But I remember my uncle asking me when I was like 8 years old what I wanted to be. And I said a lawyer. And he asked me if I liked to argue. And I said no, of course, and said I didn't think that's what lawyers did. But I think I've always been interested in just representing, justice and fairness and helping people is really just something I've been interested in. And I think that's why I wanted to do the law. And in high school, I interned at a court and did different things, connected to that. I was part of a mock trial team. And then in college, I actually studied creative writing and anthropology. And I chose those subjects because I wanted to develop my writing skills. And I'm still, a pretty creative person. And anthropology, just understanding how the world operated, culture, and kind of thinking about the law from a kind of high level. And so like how the law is being operationalized, so how people are experiencing it, different aspects of our system. And then, after I graduated from college, I went to law school and, did different work for human rights organizations and civil rights organizations. But I was always interested in the law and just had, I guess, had a different kind of perspective on how to become a lawyer than others in terms of still thinking about cultural issues, thinking about ways to be creative, but still grounded in, the legal system.
Yeah. And then where did you go to school?
So I went to Emory University for my undergrad, and that's where I got my BA in anthropology and creative writing. Then I went to law school at Fordham Law School in New York. And then after law school, I got my Ph.D. in social anthropology and law and society.
Very cool. And I know, sidebar, I asked if you're into crypto Web3, not yet. And I know a lot of people in the space definitely need more lawyers in the space. So I'm really excited to introduce you to a bunch of people. I think you're going to be a valuable asset. And you being a creative yourself, I think, it'd be really cool to have that like tech, law, like artist vibe. And I mean, everyone who's tuning in right now, you're not seeing the video that I'm seeing, but India has this amazing palette of pink hair with these pastel pink glasses on. So she's so cool and she's such an artist. So it's really, really, really exciting. And she's gorgeous. So thank you for sharing. And then what kind of law are you practicing right now?
So right now I teach law. And so I teach criminal law, criminal procedure. I also teach critical race theory and regulation of vice. And so basically, my focus has been on, helping to create the next generation of lawyers. And, a lot of my students go into all different aspects of the law, but, I've been focused on really teaching them about criminal justice policies, ways to improve the law, ways to improve the system, as well as, how we regulate different vices and how we can, rethink that and re-examine that.
Yeah, yeah, love that. And where are you teaching?
I teach at Indiana University, Maurer School of Law. So that's based in Bloomington, Indiana.
And then the other school you mentioned before, and it's one of the very first schools. Which one is that one?
Yeah, so I'm also a senior scientist for a research institute called the Kinsey Institute. And the Kinsey Institute was started by Alfred Kinsey, who was a sexologist, one of the leading sexologists. And he actually published this manuscript that ended up being quite famous about, the spectrum of sexuality that we all exist on, right? So prior to his research, the common understanding was that you're either, gay or straight, and, all normal sex happened in, heterosexual marriage. And, that was pretty much it. And he really pushed back against that, challenged that, and found that, we're actually more on a spectrum. Like, it's not just, you're either gay or straight, and that there's all sorts of types of, sex and sexualities that exist in society. And I think, his research has proven pretty not only credible, but, really valuable to how we think about sexuality. And so I do research focused on like sex work and also sexuality and online forms of sexual expression. And so I'm the only lawyer that's actually based at the Kinsey Institute.
I love all that. My mind's going in so many different directions. And I mean, just because it's something that's, I mean, so many things are coming, but one thing that's popping off is like OnlyFans, right? Like, I
Mhm.
mean, the OnlyFans thing. So I don't know if you want to talk about that a bit, but I knew about it for a while. Like, there have been some people who really don't know me, but they like seeing me from the internet, and they've like met me, and they've said to me, in their own thought, like, oh, like you should have an OnlyFans account. And OnlyFans isn't just for, what we think OnlyFans is for. And like as an entrepreneur, I always want to be open to opportunities like, Patreon, and like earning money for my podcast, or earning money for this, like a musician artist, like behind the scenes, like, oh, it's like a privé thing that you could have. And it's not just one thing. Obviously, the reputation is what it is. And maybe you could identify what you think the reputation is of OnlyFans. But first, I want to give a short story. I went to the Twitter. Well, what happened was I was scrolling because of Coachella. There were like all these popular influencers, popular musicians, like blue check verified, and like, like young, hot. And it's like a lot of them were like posing with these like gorgeous people. And like you click on their profile and it's OnlyFans. And you click on their profile and they're represented by an influencer company and it's OnlyFans, and they have all these followers. And I'm like, yo, am I doing something wrong? Like, I'm young, I'm gorgeous. Like, they're on these OnlyFans, like they're making money. Like, am I doing something off here? Because maybe I should listen to the people who said maybe I should have an OnlyFans account. Like, I'm not gonna, go against my ethics and morals and values and do certain things of that nature of porn or anything like that. That's not me. But if they can see behind the scenes of like photos, maybe exclusive photos or things about the podcast or whatever. So I just started going on the Twitter just a few nights ago, and OnlyFans was trending. OnlyFans and OnlyFan girls. And I scrolled, not for long. I jumped off because I was like, whoa, I was like sensorially so sensitive. I'm like, yo. And I felt very sad for humanity. I felt so sad of seeing these visuals of these, divine feminine, female identifying people or not, doing these poses and doing things that, I mean, if that's what they want to do, cool. But like, I'm not judging anyone, but I just felt like disheartened by like our feminism and our body, and everyone can do what they want. But there was just something about it that just was kind of revolting and very sad to dumb ourselves down to such a level to do certain things. And maybe it's not wrong, but I was just, anyways, I was exploring, and I just jumped off quick, and I did like a little tweet, and I'm just like, yo, I feel like it's way out of my league, and I feel like I've been in a cocoon for the last decade. Like, once you feel like you're on top of it, things in life, and this is on a broader spectrum, but then like you feel like do you ever feel like you like wake up and you're like, whoa, like the whole world's changed, or like I was so advanced and now I'm so behind? Like, what's going on? So maybe with sex trafficking and law, maybe you're aware of some of these subjects of like OnlyFans and things of that nature, and someone who could be tuning in, the ethics of about something like OnlyFans and justice and things. Do you have any comments, concerns, thoughts about anything that I mentioned?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts about it with OnlyFans in particular. And so with OnlyFans, as you mentioned, there are a lot of different ways to use it, right? I think a lot of the focus is on the sexually explicit content, but people use it for all sorts of things. And there may be ways to, build a connection with the audience on OnlyFans. I think, for all the content there, it's really about creating this sense of intimacy with people who are interested in following you, right? And people do that in a lot of different ways. They could be, private conversations. It could be showing them behind the scenes, as you mentioned. It could be just giving them access where there's this sense of, they are getting to know the authentic you. And I think there's a real, where we are as a cultural moment in society, there is this real value that people place on authenticity, right? Feeling like I'm getting to know this person as they really are. I'm getting to know them, the real self, as opposed to the self they put out in public or in these really polished types of forms of content. And so I think that's what OnlyFans is about. And so we see that in the sexually explicit arena in terms of people developing relationships with these audiences and giving them access to different types of materials. Sometimes it's pornographic materials. But in terms of like some of the concerns you might have with OnlyFans, it's really interesting, because what you find in OnlyFans is that some people who would ordinarily just be engaging in ordinary sex work are now on OnlyFans. And what they've said is that actually OnlyFans has given them a platform to engage in sex work without some of the harms of traditional forms of sex work that they were engaging in previously. And I think where we saw this real explosion in the use of OnlyFans was at the beginning of the pandemic, where there was this concern around, in-person content. There were restrictions in a lot of communities in terms of curfews or people being able to see each other in person. And so people went onto these online platforms and used that as a way to, engage in different forms of sexual conduct that happens online. And so, for some people, it actually provided a safer environment for them where they were able to, engage in this without some of the harms that come with, in-person content, and then also being able to screen out their clients. Now, one concern that, some feminists have raised is that, maybe this is just another form of sex trafficking. Maybe, people aren't, engaging in this in a voluntary way. However, the issue with that argument is that actually, a lot of the people who are producing content on OnlyFans have stated that, in fact, they were engaging in other forms of sex work, and this has provided them an avenue to do so in a more safe environment, in a virtual environment, and to do so in a way where maybe they're even able to like screen the individuals that they're interacting with, right? And so it has provided some opportunities for people, and especially during this time where certain individuals were really in a precarious situation. Not everyone was able to get access to stimulus money. Let's say if you don't have, proper documentation of the type of work you're engaging in previously, you may have found yourself in a situation where you weren't able to really provide for yourself, during especially the early parts of the pandemic. And so some people were actually able to, provide for themselves and actually earn a living that they were otherwise not able to earn. But, obviously OnlyFans, or using, at least relying on like sexually explicit content or producing sexually explicit content, OnlyFans is obviously not for everyone, right? And, there are certain restrictions in terms of, people should be adults, right? It shouldn't be anyone underage. And people, it should be done only with material that people are consenting to share, right? It shouldn't be any sort of, material that was taken from someone and they didn't consent to be shared online, right? There should be these kind of clear restrictions. However, if someone's in a situation where like their other options are kind of limited, or where they feel that, this is an area where I can make a living that I otherwise would not be able to make and really provide for myself and my family, family, then perhaps this can be an avenue for them. And then, OnlyFans, if you're people who aren't interested in, seeing or producing that type of content, there are other forums on OnlyFans. There are a number of people who are actually on OnlyFans now, a number of celebrities and, the like, who are using it to just build intimate connections with their fan base. And so I think there are ways to do that.
Yeah, a couple different things. And thank you for all this insight and value and just opening up the space even more. I really am touched and like the idea and aspect of the ones who choose to do this, they were doing it in a safer way without actually being physically touched, like they could still make a living and do what they need to do without being touched, like by another physical person for in safety, or putting themselves in a situation on a psychological level, going to someone's house, or actually like being pushed within certain boundaries where you can just like click end or shut the computer or whatever like that. If someone's like over it, they could just like easily shut the computer and get out. Because I've heard a lot of times, especially when the Me Too came out, that a lot of people, they've been in situations where it's flight, freeze, flight, right? Where you just get stuck and numb in the moment, where you get put in a position and people reflect back, like, or you've even heard it in public courtrooms. It's like, well, why didn't you just say no? Or why didn't you just leave? And you hear so many times in the workplace, like, your prefrontal cortex has no rationalization. It closes down. You go to fight and flight and you freeze and you're just like frozen. And then the moment passes and then you're just like, what the F just happened? And it's like, in retrospect, going back, or like people like us, or people like who, have a voice to share with their experience, or like, this is what happened. So when you're in a position, have these tools before going in. So, like, okay, this is happening. Like, no matter what, when you freeze, it just means leave, like just leave. So in this situation, because you're not in physical, you're online, you can just close the computer. You know what I mean? You could block that person. So, wow. And because, there are over 8 billion people in the world. So I'm not speaking like about anyone. I'm just speaking in general, and just kind of like hashing out some things, because we have over 60 to 70,000 thoughts per day, according to Dr. Joe Dispenza, and 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts. So like we have these thoughts that are ruminating. And so I love having you on so we can like hash out some of these thoughts and learn about new things. So that's one thing that comes up. And then, yeah. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah. I mean, I think, the safety that the online space might provide, that actually it provides for people who would otherwise be working in, like, let's say, street-based locations or other, riskier situations, is important. And, there have actually been sex work advocacy groups that have come out and spoken about this. When OnlyFans was considering removing all of the sexually explicit content and going in a different direction in response to restrictions from credit card companies, people came out and spoke about, some of the harms that would come from that. They spoke about the fact that actually, you're doing this, supposedly to restrict sex trafficking, but in fact, what you're going to do is perpetuate it, because people who would be able to screen out and ensure that they're in really safe spaces won't have the online space anymore. They won't be able to even communicate with each other in the ways that they've been able to communicate with each other previously. And so you're actually creating more risky situations. You're creating more dangerous situations. And so definitely, that online space can actually provide a safer space for people who are engaging, in sex work or in sexual activities in the online way. And I think it's easy to miss that.
And the thing that makes me kind of query and weary, I guess to say, and like really sad is, like the visceral images and things you can see online. Like I didn't search for any videos and stuff. I'm sure there's certain laws about like if it can't be recorded and things of that nature. But of course, there's leaks, and you can't trust like anyone, especially when you're doing literally dirty business that maybe one would call it, but or that kind. It's like very exposing yourself in a very vulnerable way on two sides of the street, and you have to think about your friends and your family and the privacy. So like, it's kind of sad, that like someone may feel obligated to do something like that. Maybe people want to, and they just want that kind of attention and fame. And there are people who just want to be known in a very sexual way, and that's fine. That's totally cool. But I'm sure there are a lot of people on there who are doing it who don't feel morally right about doing it. They feel like they have to do it. Because I know a lot as humans, like we do things because we like, there's like quotes about like, at the end of the day, it's like regretting and, apologizing to self for putting ourselves through something that we thought we had to grow and go through, but we actually didn't. And then you reflect back that it wasn't worth it. But But a lot of times as humans, we put ourselves through something because we think we have to make ends meet or we have to do something. So I'm sure there's a lot of people like who fine want to do it, but I'm sure there are people who maybe don't, and they're shamed and they're blamed and they're doing it anyway. And then they're taking a chance about having themselves exposed because it's online. So it can be recorded, it can be, still images, photography. I mean, I'm sure, you could get a lawyer and go to court and then, but you still get dragged down in the race for 2, 5 years, whatever, going out in the court system. And we know about law and the systems and how they play out. So any thoughts about those things?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. You're kind of going to sort of a more fundamental issue, right? That we live in a society that maybe someone feels like they have to do something or engage in some sort of labor or work that they really don't want to in order to provide for themselves. And I think that is a fundamental issue. I think you see it, whether you're talking about sex trades or other sorts of labor, minimum wage work, or, people working in coal mines, people, domestic workers, whatever the case may be. And I think, that's kind of going to some fundamental issues we have in terms of how do we ensure that everyone can be provided for, that people can, engage in the type of labor that they choose to if they want to engage in, labor, and how do we really rethink the society that we exist in? And I think that's kind of like a big question, like how do we ensure that people are able to provide for all their material needs?
Yeah.
But I don't think, eliminating certain classes of things is the way, because it often pushes people who are in desperate situations into even more desperate situations. I think really think about how do we support people and how do they say they need to be supported?
Beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, well said, well received, well said, well said. Niching in even more. So, for example, like I have, I'll just use me as the muse here. Let's say I have all these people, which I do, like on the DMs writing me, like people I don't follow, but that write me and want to. So that would be a form of intimacy that I could put on an OnlyFans of people who are liking my work as a model, as an actor, as a podcaster, as talent, whatever. And so instead of having it on a Patreon, it's more of an intimate way. And I guess it's one checking in with oneself of like, that you want that intimacy to be, that currency to be that intimate connection of them just being fans, or do you want to put it on an OnlyFans thing? Because that's what they are. They're the fans and you're connecting with them. But do we allocate that and have it be free of charge, or take those things if it's a nuance, or is it a nuance, or do you, put it on that platform? So that's something to question and find out ethically if that would be okay to do. I guess one could like start messy, try something out. And if it works out, it works out. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. Also, in respect of like marketing and like, stories I've heard personally from 50 Cent. I went on tour with him in 2007, 2008. And what people do on purpose, like create controversy on purpose for like marketing and playing the system and the people. It could be a thing of like, and like certain people, I won't mention names, who came to Hollywood and they were not a lesbian. And she said she was a lesbian just because she was gorgeous and she just got eyes on her, and she quickly worked in Hollywood because she said she was a lesbian, and then ended up with like, these males who were very famous and not, so there are marketing things, there are things that people do. Do you think the celebrities who are on the OnlyFans are maybe doing that as a part of a marketing thing, or just to empower their brand to be a part of something that's an illusion and kind of playing the system in that way? Or the celebrities maybe that of that who are on there? Because I don't know any that are, because I haven't done that kind of research. I guess I could Google and just say, hey, what celebrities are on OnlyFans, and see how they're utilizing the platforms. But based on what you know and what you think, how is that from, a different perspective?
Sure. I mean, there could be all sorts of motivations for, why people go on OnlyFans. Maybe it's just for marketing. Maybe it's, they really do want to build an intimate connection. Maybe they think that they could just make a little bit more money off of it. I think it could be a mix of all those things. And I think what OnlyFans can offer people, what you might do differently than, let's say, in a DM, maybe you have pre-scheduled calls with like certain individuals, and they're paying for the calls, but at the same time, they're paying because they want to speak to you. They want to get to know you better, right? It could be, taking them on like a day of the life. Like, what do you do? What does it look like? Showing them all the pieces of, your normal life, as opposed to the part that you just want to show to the public. And maybe only those people on your OnlyFans might get a glimpse of that. So in terms of some of the celebrities that are on there, I believe, Bella Thorne was on there, and it was this huge, there's a bit of a controversy around it because I think, she made this really substantial amount of money from like provocative pictures that she posted on there for, her fans. I think it was like $2 million in the span of just, a couple days. And so there are probably some celebrities who are on there because, they feel like they can make a little bit more money. People are interested in seeing more of them, and they feel comfortable sharing more of themselves in whatever ways.
Yeah.
And it could be photos, or it could be video chats, it can be Skypes. There's all different ways that people can use OnlyFans to create that kind of intimacy.
Yeah, because I mean, people are doing it on the reels, on Instagram, on TikTok, on YouTube. So it's like kind of the same thing, but in a subscription way, kind of like Patreon. So it doesn't have to only be like that one only thing that it has its reputation for. There's more to it. So I'm glad we were able to hash that out and talk about it, because I think it empowers women who maybe don't know, and maybe they don't have a law background, maybe they don't have certain tools and outlets of people they can talk to. And we're here to create opportunities and space and education for all. So is OnlyFans only for female identifying people, or is it for everyone?
It's for everyone.
Oh,
It's for everyone. I think actually Michael B. Jordan might have at some point had an OnlyFans.
Okay. And kind of diving in, since we're kind of on this subject, but aligning to sex trafficking. What do you think? Where are you with it? Solutions, any acclimates that you are proud of that you've seen, and more work that needs to be done? I mean, those are loaded thoughts and questions, but whatever you want to speak on, that would be awesome.
Sure. So just to define it, sex trafficking is someone engaging in, forced labor relating to sex, and forced meaning that they're being forced either by fraud or coercion, and then they're engaging in this sexual labor, this in without their consent. And so there are strong laws that prohibit sex trafficking. I think sex trafficking is terrible and something that we should be working to eradicate in society. Now, what's important though to note is that sex trafficking is actually different from sex work. But it's important to note that because at times people will confuse the two of them. And that distinction between sex trafficking, which is done by fraud or coercion and people are being forced, is a really important distinction, because at times there have been these laws passed that say that they're aimed at sex trafficking, but are really addressing sex work. Sex trafficking is really focused on people being forced into sexual labor, whereas sex work is where people are making that choice. Now, there have been some laws that are passed. So, for example, there's a law that Congress passed that goes by FOSTA, and the second law is SESTA. And it stated that it was aimed at eliminating sex trafficking, but what it actually did was prevent sex workers who post on online platforms, so like Craigslist or even Backpage, it prevented them from being able to do so on these online platforms. And the result of them not being able to do so on these online platforms was that they weren't able to screen their clients. And when they weren't able to screen the clients, they said that they ended up in more violent situations, that these online platforms actually allowed them to communicate with each other, tell each other, hey, don't go to this client, this person is a problem, have this kind of online community. And so that type of communication that they had with each other ended up being prohibited, right? Now, this law proclaimed to be about eradicating sex trafficking, but what it ended up doing is creating more violent situations for sex workers. So I think it's really important to note this distinction and to know that, like, if we're focused on sex trafficking, then we need to make sure that the laws are narrowly tailored to people who are sex trafficking victims. That way we can actually focus on them and target them. Another issue that comes with laws that focus on sex workers as opposed to sex trafficking victims is that sex workers are often the individuals who are able to identify when someone's a sex trafficking victim. They're often ones who are able to say that, because they're going to be the ones working closely with these individuals. So they're often the ones who report someone to different law enforcement officials. They're often the ones who are able to identify it, and they're often the ones involved in stating that someone's a sex trafficking victim because they see it and they're interacting with those people.
Wow, they're like angels in a way.
I guess so.
They're doing service out there. They're like regulating that kind of business.
Yes. And they would be the ones who are best situated.
It's a big business. It's a big business. We're very primal beings. People like having sex. There are people out there. Addiction is very popular, and there's sex addicts. I mean, it's not a secret. Like, we're primal. We like touch. We like feeling. We like pleasure. And, there's a lot of twisted things out there. So twisted things are happening. And so, yeah, wow, these sex workers are actually, in service of, like, for the universe, like supporting the injustice of sex trafficking. This is wow. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, I mean, they're often the ones who are identifying it. And what happens though, when we target sex workers, if they feel like they're being marginalized or they don't feel comfortable going to authorities when they see someone who's a sex trafficking victim because they feel like they're going to be arrested or what they're engaged in is going to be problematized, then they don't go and report these sex trafficking victims. They don't provide the same level of support. And so that ends up creating a more risky situation for those sex trafficking victims. Right. And so, I guess the point of what I'm saying is that at times the ways that we fashion the laws don't actually address what they're intended to address. They end up creating more difficult situations for the people who we say that we're trying to protect. So it ends up creating a more difficult situation for sex trafficking victims. You think that, okay, we'll say that all sex work is going to be criminalized and that we're just going to remove it online and that's going to help sex trafficking victims. And instead, what it creates is more dangerous situations for sex workers who are less willing to report when they see sex trafficking victims because they think they're going to be arrested or accused of being, trafficker or whatever the case may be. No, I was just saying the laws don't often make sense.
So what happens is with the law, they're trying to eradicate it like it doesn't exist, which is turning a blind eye.
Mhm.
Turning a blind eye, minimize it, act like it's not there, keep on going. And then another area are these humans that are in fear and they're dimmed down and they're hiding and isolating and not speaking up, and this unhealthy behavior and this abusive behavior keeps happening is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, exactly.
So if someone on here has funds, if they have funds and they want to contribute and or volunteer and be added value in some way to take action, be a part, is there a website or two where you send people that would be really good for this topic?
Sure. I think that looking into the organization Coyote, so that's COYOTE in the US, is a good organization that focuses on sex work advocacy, as well as the Sex Workers Project, which is based out in New York, that provides direct services work, as well as advocacy on behalf of sex workers, as well as sex trafficking victims. And so those are two great organizations that work closely with these groups and that you can learn more about from and also support.
It's the first I heard of them, and I live in New York City. So, so yeah, thank you for sharing that. Really, really appreciate you. Really, really important topics. Anything else before we pivot elsewhere?
No.
Okay. Well, I mean, that's very impactful and a great conversation thus far. And it can, sow a seed to be inspired to research more, take more action, and share this with others, especially not only females, but everyone, Yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. On the topic of, criminal justice and injustices. Oh, what you were saying when we first started, one of my favorite books is called The Republic by Plato, and it's all about just and unjust. So it just came up for me when you were speaking earlier. And, child protective services, it's so difficult because, I'm sure with, a lot of the law, it's state to state. And then within states, it's governed city to city, and every city and every state has their own law. So how can we all get on the same page if there's so many barriers and hoops to jump? I mean, it just seems quite impossible, and it's a lot of collective work we need to do. But any thoughts in that? Because actually, before, I just want to say this relates to the topics we were just talking about. It's like we're children, right? We're all children, right? We're children. There's child protective services. There's injustices in the homes, and you call child protective services. They're underfunded. You try to go to child protective services to support, and you go in there, and as long as they have electricity, as long as they have some food, as long as the kid's head isn't cracked open, as long as the mother isn't, prostituting or, in some kind of thing while the child's there, unless it's something like that, the child protective services, they do not want to break up families, and they do not want to take the child out of the home. I understand not wanting to break up families, but those very children who are stuck in those unfortunate circumstances are children. And then what happens? X amount of years later, those children are adults, and they've been taught these horrible things, bad behaviors, horrible circumstances. They had no love, no attention. Their fire is totally out. They're bitter and whatever on life, not everyone, some of them. And then they, kill, steal, cheat, prostitution, sex workers, all these things, right? And never given a chance, never given an opportunity, never given a clean slate in life to start off at an ethical baseline. And then what humans do is they shame and they blame and they point fingers at those adults. When those adults are just little kids running around, they are the same kids we had compassion for. They're the same kids we were wanting to help. But now they're young adults or elder adults with, twisted formats and twisted ways of being and thinking sensorially from, habitual bad patterns. So it's like, I'm very revved up about this. Obviously, you can see, but I just think there's so much injustice in these systems. And I am not into law. And it's like, from your perspective of what you're hearing, anything you want to add, like what can we do, or how do you feel, or what is being done, or things of that nature, and how people can help, because it's important. Like, we are children in this universe. Even when we're the young adults, we're still, or the elder adults, we're still those children running around who didn't have the support and nourishment when Child Protective Services was not called.
So I agree that we don't do enough to support people in this society. Like, we don't do enough to support people after they've been dealing with trauma. We don't do enough to support, families who are struggling, right? Like providing, for example, like affordable childcare where people are able to go and, do a decent living that they want to do, and then still be able to feel comfortable that your children will be well taken care of, and, be able to, have their needs, basic needs met. We're just not doing enough to support people, especially now. We're at a time where a lot of people are desperate, after the pandemic, during the pandemic, a lot of people lost their jobs or just trying to, figure things out. There was some disruption. Some people have lost many people, not some people, have lost family members, lost the support that they used to have for their families, and are still trying to figure it out. Our federal legislators aren't doing enough. They're not getting their act together. When they were providing support for children for, the beginning of the pandemic, they haven't renewed that. I just got a notice from my kid's school that they've been providing free lunches for all children in schools, and they're not going to do it next year, or it seems like they may not be doing that next year. So you imagine all the children who, who were close to qualifying for free lunch, but just didn't by just a little bit, how that's going to be a real struggle for their families who are also dealing with other forms of trauma. And, we're just not doing enough to support people. So I worry. I worry about where we are right now as a society. I mean, you spoke about the system that's, intended to regulate, families and children. Imagine like what difficulties we're going to be dealing with so many children who are really behind in school because of, the pandemic. Some children were able to keep up, other children were not, right? What are going to be some of the harms that come with that? We should be doing more than usual, and we're barely doing the bare minimum. And so I'm concerned. I share your concern about, what are we going to see in the next 15 years as a result of this? Like, what is going to be the outcome of, not dealing with the trauma that we're all dealing with actually in this moment because of, dealing with this pandemic, because of, all the loss that so many people have dealt with. I think we're just at a moment where we're not fully supported. And, some of what you were saying, it was just illustrating the ways that we don't support people enough, where we don't support children enough. We don't give them what they need to be able to grow up, thrive, do well, and, reach their full potential. And, I think we need to do better.
1,000. Thank you for your words. And I know this is like a broader vision, right? And there's micro details that go along with it. But, and kind of what you were saying, and kind of what comes up for me is like, okay, if these child protective services, right? Because it starts from reverse engineering and from, the inside, and we get why the system doesn't want to break up a family. But look at America. Look at society. Like, it's not working. It's already broken. Like, systems are falling down. Corporations are changing. Like, we're evolving as human beings, in such ways. And so like what happens is when you're a child and you get to a certain age and we do leave the family home, what happens? A lot of times I'm, in New York and LA, and so I'm in these bigger cities. There are people who like never go home and visit their families, right? And what happens is you become you have your blood family, then you have your chosen family, and there are people out there who create families and communities because they don't feel at home and family with their own family. So when we're young adults, we have the option and the choice to find communities to be a part of. But what if there's in child protective services within the governed law that there's like, facilities, not an orphan type, but more of a communal family type where these people can go and be a part of a grander family, like, and call humanity family. We're all family. We're all one, and with diversity, but have that educational aspect of love and nourishment. Like, I feel like people such as like yourself, who know the law, and you were talking about earlier, like fundamentals and structure. That's what I need more of in my life. All right. Like, I am like, I don't want to say lacking that. I'm not like a fundamental generational kind of structure person, but someone who has that kind of structure would bring in someone like me or a nurse or someone like you to have that love, patience, compassion to teach, to educate, and things of that nature. But there has to be like the bridge in between of it being financed in a community wallet or some kind of thing to bridge the gap. And I really feel like a crypto Web3 could possibly, bring that with some kind of outline. But like, I mean, how wonderful. I mean, like, I don't know. It depends because, there's family that's involved in the birth certificate, and then the parents saying yes to be able to like let your child go live in this more family communal healthy space. Because obviously, like, when a mother births or someone births their child, it's like they feel like they own them until they're 18, and there's that attachment. So there's attachment issues. So that's unhealthy in its own right. So I mean, it's all clearly all over the place. But I mean, I see just like in a grand level of peace and harmony of just protecting these humans, and having them be in a space where it's safe, where it is safe. So yeah, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think, thinking about alternative structures where people can choose to, make their own families and support each other. I think we saw a little bit of that last couple of years. There was this real growth in mutual aid where people were supporting each other as opposed to, going through just a charity system, but like communities coming together, sharing money with each other, pooling together to support people's needs. And so I think there are different ways that can happen where people are setting up new systems of support and care and new structures.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so pivoting and as we hone in on this impactful episode, feminism. What does feminism mean to you?
So for me, to be a feminist means that you are concerned with ensuring that everyone, women, femme individuals, women identifying individuals have access to equal, equitable opportunities, status, and experiences in life. So that's the way that I would define it. It's just really ensuring that we all can thrive in society. And, that's how I think about feminism.
And what does femme mean?
Femme would be someone who is female identifying or who views themselves in more of a feminine spirit. And so it's just a broader kind of conception of what it means to be a woman.
Yeah. So season 4 is all about women empowerment series and exploring divine femininity in all genders. So what does that mean for you? Feminism and then exploring divine femininity in all genders. Like, what are one or two takeaways that maybe someone could ponder or something you've pondered on?
I think embracing, your feminine spirit, embracing, womanhood, embracing, the things that we describe as being more feminine and, tapping into that and seeing it as a strength as opposed to weakness. For people who are listening, they won't see that I have, pink hair. But part of the reason I chose pink hair is that I realized a couple years ago that I never wore the color pink. And I asked myself, why don't I wear the color pink? And I realized the reason I don't is because I thought it was too feminine. And I had a daughter around that period of time who loves pink. And I said, why would I reject the feminine? Like, why am I rejecting it? Why can't pink also be gender neutral? Why can't I embrace it? And I just started to embrace pink, right? And so for me, it was this small way of just embracing femininity as a strength as opposed to, a weakness, and, seeing that there is power in that.
Oh, what a great story. I love that story. Wow. That's so cool. I'm so happy I asked that question. Thank you for sharing that. That's so neat. How cute. What's your little one's name?
Isla.
Isla?
Yes.
Cute, cute. And then last but not least, do you have one or two, divine feminine people you look up to? Maybe the person can tune in and do some research, a YouTube video, or maybe read a book that would be really empowering?
Sure. So one person that I always mention is Catherine Dunham. And so she was a dancer and anthropologist. And I just always admired her, the fact that she was able to engage in this work as this serious academic, this anthropologist, but combine it with her love of dance. And she studied dance during these spiritual rituals in Haiti. And she actually helped develop one modern dance technique. And so she's someone I feel like I draw a lot of inspiration from, balancing, the creative side with that academic side. Another person is Constance Baker Motley. And so she was a lawyer with the NAACP. She was also a federal judge in the district court in New York, and someone who I also look at as a role model.
Wow, thank you so much. First time I've heard about these two people, so I'm definitely going to look them up and do my own research. And wow, thank you so much, India, for being with us on She's All Over the Place. Where can people find you? Everything will be in the show notes, but where can people find you and the best way to get in contact?
Sure, people can find me on Twitter. So my handle is INGERRI. You can also find me on my faculty webpage. So if you search India Thusi, that's THUSI, it'll be the first page that shows up.
Cool, cool. And when your episode comes out the week of, I'll host you in Twitter Spaces. We'll do a Twitter Spaces and we'll honor you in the episode, and we'll have another conversation so more people can hear the episode and tune in.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, India. Okay, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. Share this with one person. Post it on Facebook, your social media handles, platforms. That would be awesome. Follow me. Go to my website, chonacas.com, CHONACAS. I have an automation set up, so it'll send you a pink sheet, a divine feminine energy that I respect and admire in Web3 and crypto, of people that you can follow to be educated and do your own research. And they're on Twitter and they're on Instagram. So just go to chonacas.com. Also, I have amazing merch of my new NFTs. So definitely check those out. And a special shout out to the Nomad Boulevard crew. I just won. They gifted me a new Nomad. So now I have two Nomads, and I named him Henri, and he is from France. He's from the France Boulevard. He's super cool. So anyway, we'll see you next week on She's All Over the Place. Take good care. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining us. We'll see you next time. Kiriaki, over and out.